All right, welcome. This is Dean Adelato. And today I am talking to you from one of my most favorite cities in the world, which is Chiang Mai, Thailand. I've been here for a couple of months or so in Thailand, and I'll be in Asia for maybe another month or so and coming back right after the first of the year. All right, today we're going to talk about something extremely important. I've touched on this before because I get questions that come from around the world. Why am I burning? Why do I feel like I'm going crazy? What is this Kundalini process? Why do I feel like I'm coming apart? And so on. That is a natural or normal process in Kundalini. As I have said before, many of our beliefs are dysfunctional. In other words, they don't work very well within the nature structure of life. So Kundalini brings about a process of change. But what really is at the heart of this fear? What is this fear that we go through as we go through the Kundalini process when we have these feelings of disintegration, these feelings of death that come about? Very simple, at the heart of it is the belief that we are our beliefs. Let me say that again. It is the belief that we are our beliefs. If you think back to the Crusades, the Christian soldiers, so on, that people there, Christians, martyred themselves for their belief. If we go into parts of the world, they will strap bombs on themselves in respect, in that sense, in response to their beliefs. People will pour gasoline on themselves and light themselves afire as a movement toward their expression and feeling of belief. Imagine one protecting, one dying for a belief that might change on the morning tide. Because if we look back, not only personal beliefs, but many of the beliefs of the world have changed in small ways and also in major ways, and yet people will die for them. Yes, because we think that we are the structures within our mind. We have not come to the psychological understanding, the emotional understanding, that the content of our mind is not who we are. That we are not those structures that we think. We are not those things that we imagine. We have them, and yet they become so ingrained that pretty soon they have us. You've jumped on a tour bus. You're a 3-year-old, a 5 years old, a 7 years old, a 10 years old. And it begins to take you through, and the tour guide begins to show you what they want you to see. They say if you have this belief, if you think this way, if you imagine that way, you'll get to heaven. If you think this way, if you imagine that way, if you see yourself in this way, you'll become rich, and you'll be loved, and you'll be cared for, and you'll be liked. If you think this way, you'll have freedom, and so forth. In other words, the tour guide takes you on a trip. In that sense, we're taken on a trip as we grew up into life. And those beliefs oftentimes becomes who we think that we are. A doctor dies and he goes to heaven. And as he gets to the pearly gates, he has on his white coat and stethoscope and so on. And St. Peter says, you can't wear any of that in here. Here we don't have prejudice. We don't have a hierarchy of better, best, or any of that. He says, you have to take that off. And the doctor finally relents. He says, okay. So he takes off the white coat, stethoscope, walks into heaven and starts looking around, seeing what's there. And in the process, he gets a little hungry and he discovers that there's a chow hall, and he goes to the chow hall, and sure enough, there's a long line in the chow hall, but that's okay. He's in no hurry. I mean, he's in heaven. And as he's standing there waiting to get his food, here comes this guy with a white coat and stethoscope on, walks by everyone right to the front of the line. Wow, I mean, is he angry? And he goes running down to the pearly gates and starts talking to St. Peter. He said, what is this? He said, I thought there was no hierarchy, that there was no prejudice here. He said, what's going on? St. Peter, what happened? What's wrong? He said, well, I'm standing in line to get my lunch. And he said, this guy with white coat and stethoscope walks right by everybody, right to the head of the line. St. Peter said, oh, not to be concerned. He said, that's God acting like he's a doctor. Well, don't you know somebody? maybe yourself. We've all experienced it in some ways, that we become so hooked into our particular idea of who we are that we have forgotten that it is nothing more than a mental structure. It is a belief, but it is not who we are. If it was who we are, we would not have the ability, the freedom to literally change. Kundalini, which could be called chi, could be called life energy. Many times religion have grabbed onto this, but it is not a religious process. It, in fact, is an evolutionary process. Evolution means that we move to the next step of understanding. The next step of understanding is that deep internal knowing that we are not the content, that we are not the beliefs. That radically changes how we perceive the world. So let me ask you a question in this way. Do you, I should say, support your beliefs, or do your beliefs support you? There's a big difference, isn't there? A belief in ecology, a belief in green, so to speak, a belief in clean air, a belief in clean oceans supports whom? All of life, every living creature on the planet. A belief in capitalism, which is consumption without end, consumption without control, literally mostly supports whom? The people who are into power, the people who are wanting to control the world. One belief is collaborative. That belief in ecology is a collaborative belief because it not only supports you, you support it. But the belief in capitalism is a one-way street. It is non-supportive of that string of life. So the question that you want to ask yourself as you're going through this process, or if you're thinking about going through this process, if you're thinking about wanting to open up what we call that Kundalini process, let's call it an energetic process. In that, remember that you are not the content of your mind. That it is going to literally change you to the deepest structure of who you think that you are, not only mentally, but also emotionally, so that you begin to see the world from a very different perspective. No longer the perspective of right or wrong, this or that, Republican or Democrat. You now see that there is another way of thinking. All right, thanks for being with me. This is Dino Delano. And if you will go to my website, which is called coolzenhealing.com, let me say that again, coolzenhealing.com, you can click on the book, Discover the Magic in You, and it will give you an in-depth understanding about beliefs. Or you can also click on the book, which is more about Kundalini, which is called A Seeker's Journal. Thanks for being with me. Dino Delano. Take care.